Okay, great. We are live to YouTube. Thank you to everyone who is here listening and participating with us. We really appreciate your being involved. And if you haven't already, don't forget to respond to our survey. You can access it easily just by going to the town website and finding us under committees and councils. So I will call the meeting to order. One quick housekeeping. We've got minutes from the August 10th meeting that were shared around to the group. And one thing I just want to say is these minutes are a doozy every time. We have so much content in our meetings. And I just want to thank our wonderful administrator for doing such a great job with this. And I want to publicly apologize. I've been saying her name wrong, you guys. So Kirsten, thank you so much for your work on the minutes every time and all your work you're doing for us behind the scenes to help keep us organized and functioning smoothly.
My pleasure. Terrific group.
Yeah, so with that, I move to approve the August 10th meeting minutes. Can I get a second?
Aye.
Great, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, awesome. So we can jump right in. The first item is update on our survey. Can everybody see my screen, by the way? Meeting? Okay. Great. So update on the survey. Before I hand it to Larry, I just want to say that the postcard went out. It should have been in everybody's mailbox. And the total number was 4,623, I believe, postcards went out. And they went to owners of residential and commercial properties. So we worked with the town assessor's office to make sure that everybody was included who's listed as, the owner on an address. So with that, I will turn it over to Larry. I know he has some exciting updates on response rate.
Yeah, sure. And I could share my screen too, if you like.
Oh, sure. Yep. Let me stop sharing mine.
But I've been tracking the responses as they have come in, more or less. Let me just see if I could find the right screen to share. You know what, Katie, I'm having a little bit of trouble with this, so I might not be able to share what I wanted to share. Let me see if I could pull it up while I'm talking. But the, oh, here we go. Let's see if I could do it now. You know what, I don't know that I'm going to be able to do this the way that I thought it. I guess I'm just not as proficient as I thought I was. But let me just give you the verbal then, and I won't share my screen.
No problem. Not a problem at all.
Just right before the meeting, I checked and we were up to 462 survey responses that have come in online, which is great. And in addition to that, we have written responses that haven't been entered or tabulated yet. And I don't have a full count on the written responses, the hard copies that have come in. But based on what we've had over the last few weeks, I would estimate that we're probably at about 500 total responses. I had put the goal at 600 responses. I just checked, I think we have a little bit over 4,000 households in the town of Lewisboro. So if we're now at about 10% of the total households. I think we have about 12,000 residents, but some of those residents are children, so I wouldn't expect that we would get a 10% response rate from the number of residents. But all in all, I guess the summary is that we're doing pretty well. Just since the postcards went out last week, we had a significant volume of responses last week. I think we had about 80 or 90 responses last week and about 50 or 60 this week, which really gets us up there. We still have hard copies of the survey that are available in the local post offices. I think the different members on the steering committee have been taking responsibility to make sure they are stocked. And I know Wacabuck, South Salem has copies of the surveys. I think John said that Vista, by email, I think he said that Vista has copies. And Cross River and Golden's Bridge, I'm not sure. Charlene and Mark, I don't know if you have an update on that. But in any case, in general, we have hard copies available for any residents that need it. But we are pushing the online responses because that makes it a lot easier, I think, both for the respondent and also for us to tabulate the results.
Awesome. Let's just pause there for a second. I know everybody worked really hard to make sure last week all the post office locations were fully stocked. Thank you, John, for trying Vista one more time. That's awesome. Let's just go down the line, and just because we've hopefully, fingers crossed, we will have more people coming to post offices this week to pick up copies. Let's just go down the line and see if everybody is available to do each location. And if not, totally cool. Just, raise your hand and we'll figure out who can do it instead. So, so Larry, for Wacabuck and South Salem, can you check again by the end of the day, Sunday?
Yep, Wacabuck and South Salem both, there are bulletin boards there, and there's manila envelopes posted with thumbtacks on the bulletin boards, one envelope with blank surveys and one with completed surveys. And as of this past weekend, Wacabuck and South Salem, I think Kirsten had checked, and they both had a number of available copies of surveys for residents to use.
Cool. That's great. We just want to make sure they continue to have enough blank copies and that any completed copies get picked up. So next, Mark, are you good to check Golden's Bridge again this week?
I'll go check. And when I went there, and so thank you, Kirsten, for making all those copies available and beautifully packaged. I mean, wow, that worked really smoothly. So what a delight. Yeah, so I posted the color flyers in the brand new community board at the Golden Bridge Plaza there, shopping center plaza behind the glass, one on each side. And then I talked to the post office manager about placing them. So he allowed me to just place them on a little table there when you enter the station, the post office. And I actually had a couple residents come in and fill them out. A couple women came in and filled them out when I was there. So that was great. And they were hot to trot with comments. So interesting to see what they wrote. And then I also placed flyers at the Lewisboro Town Park as well. And so I am happy, John. I can practically walk to the Oak Ridge Shopping Center. It's a 20-minute walk for me, so I can actually go over there to check at that post office as well, if that's helpful, John.
Yeah, I mean, I'm down there a lot too, so yeah, we'll see. They would not let me. There is no bulletin board in Vista, and they would not let me tape them to the wall. But I taped them to the table. I'm hoping that the tape will keep them from walking off with the envelopes, which has happened twice before. So I had that discussion with the postmaster, and so she did allow me to do that. And I taped another flyer at Greenwich Produce.
Mm-hmm.
Yep, I saw the flyer at Greenwich Produce. I also put up flyers in a plastic sleeve at the Vista Park stand.
Cool. Sounds like we're very well covered. So Mark will do Golden's Bridge. I mean, it doesn't hurt for you if you happen to be at the post office, you can certainly check whenever you're there. But just for simplicity, we'll leave Vista with John since he was the face that the postmaster will recognize. And Charlene, are you good to check Cross River this week? You're on mute. You're on mute.
Yeah, I had a little COVID scare this week, so I was unavailable. But yes, I can do it for Saturday.
Okay, awesome. And thank you to Jane who loaded up Cross River and got it all ready for you last week while you were.
Thank you, Jane. I
Yeah.
didn't know who did it. Thank you very much.
Yeah. So thank you, everybody. We're all hands on deck for this. I know it's tedious, and we've been checking the post offices for weeks and weeks now, but it's definitely seems to be our best bet in terms of just having the widest coverage of availability for the paper surveys. So thank you so much for the work that is going into that. So at least a couple more weeks of that. We want to talk about the library fair, Larry?
Yeah, sure. I believe we put in an application for a table, for one of the community tables, and our application was accepted by the library fair director. Thank you very much for that. And so we'll have a table, a folding table at the fair for the full day. I would like to have hard copies of the flyer and the surveys, and we'll have a tablecloth on the table, and I'd like to have some things printed to grab some people's attention so they know why the table is there and why somebody's at the table. And I'll commit to being at the table for a part of the day. And if there's anybody else on the steering committee that is able to join me or take another part of the day, we could talk offline just to make sure that we're all coordinated.
That's great. Thank you so much for taking the lead on that, Larry. That'll be a really great opportunity to interface with some folks and just spread the word about the survey and what we're doing. So that's awesome.
I'll definitely fill in, and yeah, I'll definitely can do a couple hours there, Larry.
That's great. Thanks, Mark.
Thanks, everybody. And just circling back, Kirsten wants everybody to know that if you need any additional paper copies of the survey or new envelopes or anything for the post office location, you can just shoot her an email. Probably, I'm guessing, Larry, you can keep me in the loop and I'll help if we need printing resources or anything. But maybe Kirsten can help us out with that as well. Okay, cool. So any other follow-up comments or questions about the survey? Okay, hearing none. I'm just keeping an eye on okay, got it. Moving on to the next topic. Okay, so update on the RFP to the consultant. And this is another place where we have to pause and say thank you so much. Charlene has put so much work into this RFP. Everybody has done a great job of commenting and helping make it into the wonderful document that it is. And we got great comments and feedback from the town board and from the planning board and from ACARC, and lots of support for the content of the RFP and our mission statement and how we're going about putting it all together. So that's really, really great. And as Charlene has said, now really is where the rubber meets the road. And I will pass the microphone to Charlene in a second. I know Jane is listening right now. We'll probably break form with the agenda and at some point ask Jane to jump into this conversation, probably after all the items on this topic on the agenda are gone through. But my goal is that we just kind of like really walk through the next steps of what will be happening with the RFP, make sure we're all on the same page in terms of the plan, and then figure out what we need to do to actually, hit the send button and get this thing out there into the world. So with that, I will hand it to Charlene.
Okay, thank you. And thanks to everyone for helping out with this and get your comments, et cetera. It made it a better document. So the document is done. What do we do now? We have to make a few decisions. And although it's C, the town informal approval of distribution plan, that seems to me the first question. Are you doing to the town board, to Jane? Are you going to do it by informal saying, yeah, go do it? Or do you want to take a formal vote on it? And that's really up to you. Either way works. And after we get that done, I think that we can deal with the dates that it would be due. I know I'm not going in sequence, but those are the questions that I would have at this point. We
Okay.
have, I believe, 13 possible applicants to the RFP. Those will have to be mailed and emailed to those people. But before all that happens, we need a notice of the RFP. My understanding is that it has to be written. So I'll take that on myself to give to Janet. A notice of publication. And that's why I need sort of the answers to, you know, are you doing it informally? Are you doing it at a meeting? Blah, blah, blah. Ask for electronic copies also. No, I think we should ask for both, actually. But that's my opinion.
Should we pause here for a second? Let's
Yeah.
maybe, Jane, if you want to unmute and let us know your thoughts about the informal versus formal approval of publication.
I think that we have a meeting on Monday and that it's probably better to do formal.
Oh, this Monday? This coming Monday?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay. That's earlier than I realized. Cool.
I think so. Let me double check that now that I said it. Otherwise it can be less formal. Excuse me.
Either way works. We would just, you know, adjust the timeline accordingly.
Yeah,
Monday is
both are legal.
I just know that I saw the email that you all sent the RFP back incorporating all the feedback. And I guess what I would want is kind of a nod from each member of the board that yes, they saw the final version and that one works for them. So that's why I would lean toward the more formal. I just don't know when our next meeting is, because now that I said that, I'm not sure.
I think
It might
it's
not.
the 13th of September.
It's not until the 13th, right?
Yeah.
So
Okay. I mean, I think it's fine and make it formal.
And Jane, if I can ask you with the resolution, can you do it subject to the agreement of the dates? Because I don't think we should put it in now as to the dates, because there's some work that we have to do, like I have to put out the notice, etc. So
Okay.
if you could do it subject to the dates agreed to by the chair of the steering committee, let's say, or you know,
yes,
or by
subject to
you.
the
I don't care who, just as long as it's subject to.
yes. Okay.
Okay. So we're going to write the town board will do, so that will that be approval by resolution, basically?
Yes.
Okay. Got it.
Yeah, because I have to then give the notice of the RFP to Janet.
Right.
To the town clerk.
Yeah.
Got it.
And also then we have to place, I believe that we should place an ad in the Planning Association.
Mhm. I was looking at their website and it looked, the New York branch of the American
Right.
Planning Association, it looks like you can very easily just upload electronically.
The notice,
Yeah.
right. And who is going to send out because I'll have all the addresses and the emails for those 13 that we're going to send it out to. Who is going to send them out?
Is there a legal reason why it needs to be sent via paper and electronically?
No, you can just do it electronically if you want.
Is there a administrative reason, or like, are people,
It's just to make sure that they get it, you know, because you get emails all the time and you may not look at them, and it's
right?
just, it's a more formal way of doing it. You can do it either way. It has no legal, but I don't want these companies to just miss it.
Right, yeah.
Especially considering it's a small list that we're sending it out to.
Yeah, it's only 13 people. To 13 firms, I'm sorry.
Okay.
So Charlene, what do you think of so I do a lot of RFPs, and by the way, I thought your RFP was good to go a month and a half ago. So I was like, actually I talked to Larry offline. I was like, what do you think of that? I was like, actually, let me retract it. I have no comments. But anyway, is there any downside to just calling the top 13? I'm happy to make a list and say, by the way, or
It has to go to the managing partner, and they really, to cold call, I've found, unless you know people there, I know a few firms that I could call, but not all of them.
Right. Okay. All right.
Because then they look at it as a cold call.
Gotcha. All right. Well, you know best. You've a lot of
No,
experience.
it's just that, yeah. I know a few firms, but I don't know all 13, enough that I could call somebody there.
Yeah. Well, it's to our benefit. The more people have eyeballs on this and the more responses we get, the more we learn, the more we feel confident in who we've picked. So it's to our benefit to make it as competitive as possible.
Yeah.
If you want, I will take calls about it, but I won't send, I don't have the time to send them out. And I don't have the time to receive them all, because, what they'll do is they'll send hard copies and an email. And I don't, it'll get lost in the email for me.
Well, that brings me to, so pausing, I think we're all in agreement that we are going to send a paper copy and an email copy to the 13 firms on the list. In terms of actually writing into the RFP and instructing the firms that respond, we can tell them, please send your responses, your questions, etc., to this email address. We have to decide what that is. And I'm wondering if in the interest of sustainability, we just say, just send us a PDF of your response. And then I think most of us are probably going to look at it on our computers. If we do want to print out a few copies, we certainly could do that through the planning office. What are folks' thoughts about that? Just asking for electronic responses instead of having them send us paper copies.
I think give them a choice of sending both or one, because some of them like to have that hard copy just for visual. You give them, you can send both or just the PDF.
Would it be okay if they want to send a paper copy, can they just send one?
Oh, yeah.
Because right now it does say we're requesting 10 hard copies.
Yeah, with the RFP, the usual basis of an RFP, you do have a number of hard copies. That's changing, but it hasn't changed.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like, it should change.
Yeah.
I don't know whether I want to be at the forefront at this point.
I'm
You
fine with
can.
being at the forefront, unless anyone on the committee or Kirsten, you can speak to your experience working with the folks on the planning board and ACARC, and Jane, you can speak to the town board. Is there anyone who really wants a paper copy in their hand? Mark wants one.
I do.
Charlene wants one.
If you get a PDF, it's as good as a paper copy once you print it.
Yeah, well.
Parsons is gonna want one.
Okay, that's 3. So, yeah, I think that's fine then. Then why don't we say 3 submit
Whatever you want.
We can round up maybe 5 paper
5
copies.
is nice. 5 is good. 5 is good.
So we saved 5 copies worth of paper. I'm happy.
Okay. Save maybe a half a tree.
Electronic copies and 5 paper copies. And then in terms of who the responses get sent to,
Before that, who is
yeah.
going to, who's the letter from? Because those might be 2 different things. Are we going to send the letter from
Yeah.
Peter Parsons? We going to send the letter from the town clerk?
the letter asking for responses,
Right.
is that the same as the notice of RFP, or is that something different?
That's something different. If you want a cover letter, that would have to be from Peter and the board. That, because they're sending it out.
Gotcha.
And that's a good point, John.
Yeah.
Personally, what you can do is you can send it all to Kirsten and send her all the copies. And also somebody would have to sort of take the calls, and then feel free for substantive matters, because, they can call me, but I'm not going to take calls like, well, I can only send 3 copies. Do you know what I mean? But if there's a substantive issue, I'll handle it.
So I think the call should go to Kirsten, and then she can sort them out and send you the ones of significance.
John, I agree with you, but I didn't want to do it just by saying,
Well,
Kirsten,
yeah.
hey.
Let us know, Kirsten. I'm happy to also be sort of the central hub too, or instead of you, but let us know what you think / your availability. We don't want to load that on you if you don't have capacity.
I'm happy to be the point person on both sending and receiving. I just wasn't clear sending it out. Should that come from the town clerk? So I would.
Right.
It really should come from the town clerk. It should be Peter's letter and come from the town clerk.
Right.
In terms of like an email, it should go out from the town clerk's email address.
Probably.
I wonder if she's okay with that. It's a lot of work for her too.
Well, not if we compose the letter and just give it to her.
That's true.
Well, it is a town board function. Jane, maybe you can speak to that?
Yeah. I mean, we want to be by the book, but we also want to be efficient. So Jane, we defer to you.
Yes, so recap for me what it is that we're deferring to me for.
Peter, I'm sorry, Katie.
We will definitely, I think it makes sense to have a cover letter from Peter and the board for the RFP, but we can definitely draft that and just forward to you, and then you guys can tweak accordingly at the meeting when you're doing your resolution.
Yes, I think that it would be nice if even if you could draft something in bullet form, and and we can embellish it, that would be helpful, just because when you've been working on it so hard, I think you have like a more direct ask. But then I think it coming from the town board, I think that Charlene is right. I think it's within the purview of the town board, and you're an arm of that, right? That's working toward this goal that you've been mandated to work toward on our behalf. So I think it does come out from the supervisor, and that's the most appropriate step.
Okay. Cover letter from the supervisor. And then in terms of sending out the RFP, the other thing we were deferring to you on is technically it would be good if the email to the 13 firms went from the town clerk's email address.
Right.
But we don't necessarily want to put that on Janet if she's got a lot of other stuff on her plate as well.
Oh, I think that's a reasonable ask for Janet.
Yes, I'm going to draft the notice for her. And then if she can send out those, the other things, because she's going to have to notice it and then send out all those, the 13 firms. And I will provide the addresses, the attention to, and the emails.
Oh, well, look, Charlene's already done 85% of the work. So
That's great.
So I think that sounds great. Yeah.
And then Kirsten can send out the paper copies to the planning firms as well. That way the town clerk's office doesn't need to do that.
I certainly can.
I think everything should be like, it shouldn't be sort of bifurcated. I think that if everything can come, if she has all the information, I don't think it's going to be too much of a burden on Janet. What do you say, Jane?
I agree with Charlene.
Okay.
I think that I said, thank you, Kirsten, and I was just about to say, but it probably makes more sense to keep it coming from one office, and it should be from the townhouse.
Okay, cool. Got it. That sounds good.
And so, yeah, so everything that you're kind of telling us, we'll just wrap it up kind of nicely, and then, we'll ask Janet, who is happy to serve, and she takes direction from the board.
It's only 13. It's not a huge number, so.
No, not at all. And Charlene's done 85-90% of the work. It's just about communications. I think
Yes.
Janet likes that part of her job very much.
And Jane, also, it would not be, I think it would be appropriate if Kirsten could receive all the applications.
Right, yeah. What you mean,
'Cause that's easier because, you don't want to,
right,
because I know Janet has a lot of papers. And,
Right.
and I know Kirsten does too, but she'd be looking, she knows what to look for.
right,
just
right.
put-
On the receiving end, that makes sense for it to come through the planning office.
so
Yeah,
put-
but going
put that in-
out,
Put that in the cover letter.
absolutely.
Yeah, and it goes into the RFP too.
Yeah. Kirsten, does that sound reasonable to you?
That is fine, and I will say out of the 5 copies we receive, if I could retain one for the record.
Oh, perfect. Good.
Sure.
And we round it up appropriately. Perfect. Awesome. Did one of you have a comment on that?
I have a couple of comments. If you don't mind, I'll just jump right in. I mean, my concern is always like, I'm throwing a party and nobody shows up. It's only happened a few times, but I would just be concerned that we get to the deadline and we don't have any responses. And I was just thinking if there's a way that we could gauge like who's looking at this, who's considering responding to it. And I have two thoughts on that. One is, I mean, we have this survey information, we have all this raw data, and we also have a summary of all the raw data that's provided by the service that we're using to do the surveys. So I'm thinking, what if we, in the cover letter or in the RFP, if we made some reference that this information is available, but they have to take like a step to get the information. And then the other thing I was thinking, I know, the census information is starting to come out, but a lot of it's not public yet. Is there any census information that we, or not we as the steering committee, but we as the town may have access to, that we also may be able to share it, maybe not right away, but at some point during the process, that we could also make available to the potential applicants. So those were the two thoughts that I had with regard to the census and the survey information that we've now started to collect.
May I address that?
Mhm.
Larry, I can guarantee you 5 of those firms are going to answer. I know them personally. So and I would actually like to hear what they say first before we give them anything. Because you really don't want to move them one way or another. And this is just, it's going to be a very useful tool, but I would like to hear what they're saying before we give them anybody's bias.
I will say that we, in the final version of the RFP, we just today put in the graph that shows
Thank you.
population numbers, and those are the most recent, include the most recent census population numbers. And that's an interesting point. I did make sure that the final version references that we have a survey open, That way the consultants
Mhm.
know what to look for. And I also provided a link to the PDF document. It's just posted on Google Drive, but anyone with the link can view it. That shows what the questions in the survey are.
Yeah, that's fine.
But in terms of, I like the idea of them reaching out, if responses are available upon request, so then we could have a dialogue. But I also hear what you're saying, Charlene, that we don't want to influence them. Let's take a poll of committee members in terms of what folks think about that. So does anyone agree with Charlene that we don't want to provide survey responses, the raw data for survey responses so far, to consultants at any point before we hire them, because we don't want to bias them?
I agree with Charlene.
Yeah. Mark does too. Okay, then that's a majority. Yeah, that makes sense to me. I can kind of see it both ways, but
Yeah, it's,
yeah. So I'll take out that sentence. I'll just alert them that the survey is in progress, but I'll take out the sentence that says info available upon request.
well, they can look at the questions. That's
Yeah.
not a problem.
Yeah.
It's just the answers that would.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, awesome. Any other, before we move to the next points, any other general questions about the RFP? Okay, the next thing I wanted to talk about was just generally in terms of, we'll obviously have to decide on a deadline after we figure out the date it's getting sent out. But just generally in the preliminary timeline that we've been working with, which we put together at the beginning without any knowledge of how this would all play out in terms of timing, so we're not beholden to it, of course. We did target reviewing responses. We thought we'd have sent out in August or September review responses, start interviewing with the goal of making a recommendation in January 2022. That to me right now seems way too tight, especially when you think about the days we might lose for holidays and holiday travel. But just roughly, if let's say we do get it sent out the middle of September, what's a reasonable, is it too fast of a turnaround to ask the consultants to get it back by the end of October? Would we get more responses if we asked by mid or end of November? Do folks have a feeling about that?
October 31st, I love Halloween. So, that's great. But I think with the holidays in between, especially these Jewish holidays in between, that throws out whole of September, actually.
Yeah.
So it's really dependent on when the holidays are. So I think October 31st would be a little too aggressive a date.
Yeah, companies are also trying to sort out working conditions now, so everything's kind of slowed down. So I would give
Very
them.
true.
Yeah. Okay.
I wouldn't push back the due date much past like the Thanksgiving holidays. It should probably be some point before then.
Well, November 1st gives, the end of November. You get into
15th.
December. You get into December and companies are closing business to
Yeah.
finish out the year, so they're not going to look at the.
How about the 15th?
November 15th. Yeah, that sounds good. We have to pick.
You have to pick a day.
Yeah, and if it
Yeah.
gets sent out September 15th or September 30th, that's still reasonable, I think.
Yeah.
So, okay. So we'll agree a deadline for responses is November 15th, and then we can kind of say review and have interviews into early January 2022,
Right.
or sorry, into early 2022. And in terms of a recommendation goal, maybe more like February or March.
Yeah.
We don't have to commit to that necessarily. It'll be, I guess before we do that, the next thing I wanted to make sure we're all on the same page about, this is outlined in the RFP. But in terms of who will be reviewing the applications once they come back, and then how that process will work. So the way it is outlined in the RFP is that the committees that are responsible for reviewing the RFP responses would be us, the steering committee, plus the chair of the planning board, plus the chair of the zoning board, and plus the chair of ACARC, the community art appearance board. And then those who are identified to move on to the next stage to have meetings with, we would have virtual meetings with them, us steering committee and the planning board. But that the steering committee will be the body that is making the final decision and providing the supporting materials for the decision and what we're recommending to the town board.
Just a clarification, since I think it's important that the town board sees this earlier. We would assume that the steering committee includes the extended steering committee with Dan and Jane.
Good question.
Yes, I think that's fine.
I assume
Because it's the steering committee and Jane and Dan are part and
It gives
parcel.
us some early kind of feedback without the formal town board involvement, but
Right.
I think it's the right way to do it.
Jane, go ahead. I see you're unmuted.
Yeah, I was just gonna ask John to go back to, I didn't hear what you said, John.
So I looked at the list, and the last group that sees it is the town board, but I would think it would be appropriate because we would like to get sort of an insight into the town board, that the steering committee would include you and Dan as sort of extended members. So we get kind of an early town board view also.
Yes.
I think what has to be done, I agree with you, John, but it has to be a liaison position, which means that there would be not a vote by either Jane or Dan as to which ones we choose or not. Obviously, they can be present, but it would not be, because we do not want to be accused of the appearance of not impropriety, but appearance of being led.
I agree. It's advisory.
It's totally advisory.
Right.
Right.
It's like me and the planning board with the CAC. They can completely ignore me.
They don't, though. But we never ignore you. I take all your comments really seriously. In fact, I bring them up. You give me something to say.
I think the way that we've structured, it would be the same as the way that we've structured these meetings, where
Yes.
we have Jane and Dan as participants listening and able to chat throughout the whole meeting, but then that they have their allotted time where they have the floor to speak. And I think we've done a really good job of listening and incorporating their feedback throughout. So we would definitely want to keep doing that. But that's a good point. So I wrote it explicitly right here. And does anybody have any questions about that? Or I just want to make sure we're all on the same page about that and everyone's comfortable, including Jane, just so, I know the town board saw this in the RFP, but just making sure we're all good before we finalize it in writing and send it out to the world. Okay, I'm not hearing any concerns. One thing I will point out, I do think that for ease of scheduling and ease of recording and record keeping, and just to respect everybody's time, limiting travel time and all that stuff, that keeping all of these meetings, even the interviews with the consultants themselves, keeping them virtual is the best option for us.
I have no problem with that.
Okay, great. Fantastic. So then circling back, we're gonna need time for the steering committee, the planning board, the zoning board, and the architecture board. Everyone's gonna need to review at least, we don't know, 5 to 10 or more documents, and then the interview. So I think the recommendation goal will kind of have to wait and see once we get a better idea of how many responses we get and how long, just in terms of having meetings, how many meetings we can have. But we can kind of just roughly say early 2022 as sort of a placeholder.
Yeah, keeping in mind, a lot of those boards meet once a month, so.
Right.
Well, I mean, with the chairs, we can meet at any time. It's not, because it's not the full board. May I make a suggestion that at one point or another, someone will put together sort of a checklist of what we're looking for in with the firm, and maybe give a rating. So, because if we get enough answers from these people, it would be nice to say what we're rating and how we're rating it and how that compares.
I'd be happy to do that. A due diligence checklist is my jam.
All right.
Yeah, and you probably want to weight them somewhat, because I have a feeling that the price is going to have more weighting than some of the others.
John, you're right. It's just at this point, I just wanted to throw it out.
Yeah, no, it's a good idea, because we want to be able to show some kind of objectivity to this thing.
Right.
Yeah, instead of saying, well, I just really like these people.
Right.
Which push comes to shove, I would say.
Okay. Yeah, that's a great idea. So can I write early 2022 just as a placeholder? Is that okay?
Mhm.
All right. Okay, just looking back at this, are there any other places other than, I know I'm jumping back a ways, but any other places other than the New York chapter of the American Planning? Are there other general places we can post this just to ensure
Well,
better
it's
net?
going to go into the record review. Where does Jane would know this? Where do you usually publish?
Record review.
Okay, so it'll go into the record review. I don't know. I think that would be really sufficient, because I think we sort of recognize which firms that are within our vicinity and work with our with Westchester communities,
Okay.
and word gets around.
Okay, good. And I know the New York Planning Federation is separate from the APA, so we can
Right.
too. Okay, awesome. Does anybody else, just looking at this list, we have a few more minutes for RFP related stuff. Any other thoughts or questions? Okay. Well, I think we have a very clear idea then of what the next steps are. And I can reach out to, I'll make a note to reach out to Mary and get that on the agenda for the town board, if that's helpful.
I already did that.
Oh, sweet. Okay. I won't write
I
it.
CC'd you, so if I didn't word something correctly, please feel free to correct me.
Okay, awesome.
What an efficient committee this is.
Probably give Janet a heads up also.
About the resolution.
About what we're asking her to do.
Oh, yes, Janet Donahue, absolutely. Yeah.
Yes. Okay, I will do that. I will send her an email right now.
Thank you. And we're ahead of schedule, everybody. So efficient, effective. I love it.
Can I just ask Charlene sort of a practical question? given her legal experience in these things. So I've released RFPs, and we say we're looking for an RFP for a 100 kW generator. And we get all these RFPs back, and then we get a contractor that gives us a 100 kW generator, and they give us an alternate, which is two 50 kW generators, which may give us, like in that case, redundancy, and they actually came in less expensive. And we were really interested in moving forward with the two 50 kW generators because it gives us redundancy and it was less expensive than we didn't know that material was available. But then we get tripped up with legal considerations that we can't accept or review that bid because we didn't exactly specify that thing. So do you have?
Oh, no, there's a difference between competitive bidding in government, actually, in competitive bidding, which in that case, you could not do that. But a request for proposal is with, professionals that have a particular knowledge on certain aspects. So they can throw the kitchen sink in and we could take it.
Okay, so you have discretion and wiggle room to
Very, very, very broad.
what you determine to be in the best interest of the town of Lewisboro and to accept a portion or any or none. Blah,
Absolutely.
blah, blah.
I think the RFP even states that, it's like a wide open thing. And in fact, when you ask for new ideas and innovations, I mean,
Right.
That's what you're doing.
Right. Okay. So you're protecting a lot of discretion, so you feel comfortable that.
I'm very comfortable.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Great. Cool. Okay, so seeing no other comments on the RFP section, I'm gonna pass the microphone to Mark, just to give us a quick update on any thoughts or activities happening with the Hudson Valley Greenway Community Grant opportunity.
All right. Well, so here's the good news is that I did some research and looks like we are in the strike zone. We qualify for potentially, we are qualified to apply, as I understand it, for both a Greenway Planning Grant and a Greenway Compact Grant. So based on the maps and area, we qualify, we could do both. So that's the good news. And the way this is a matching grant, which they say ranges typically from $5,000 to $10,000, but you can request and receive more than that. They are provided on a reimbursement basis, so they're after the fact. So we'll have to prove that we spent the money and then we're reimbursed for 50% of it. So that's the good news. It is very, so I did a little due diligence. Looks like we've actually, Tony Concalves said that he applied and was declined in the past. Tony on the board, town board. So I've got to have a call with him. We've been missing each other as to why and how we can better our application the second time around. They require letters of referral. They require a resolution like you've done before here. They're going to require a town board resolution, their letters of referral, and a clearly defined budget, and more supporting documents than I think we can practically pull together by the September 10th deadline. However, my goal, it's up to you how much you want to push, Katie, but my goal would be to pull this together for the November 8th deadline.
Cool. I think that would be great if you're, we'll take the same approach that we did with the grant that John was working on, acknowledging that it's a lot of work and coordination and all that good stuff. If you set the deadline and you can make it happen, that's fantastic, but we certainly will not pile any undue pressure on your shoulders. Does this have a rolling, if you miss the November deadline, does it go away completely, or is there something else in the future?
Yeah, there's another deadline. So there's three allocations annually. And I have reached out to them to ask them, you know, can they tell me where they stand with funding, and is there more funding available, for example, in the November deadline, the November allocation than there might be in the one in early 2021. I'm trying to find the dates for that. But so I have sent them a couple emails, but I'll keep you informed and I'll report back. And yeah, so May 7th. So if we miss it, November 8th, May 7th.
Okay.
So
That may
it'll be a
be,
year.
yeah, that may be a good time because we'll have whoever we're choosing by that time. So we'll have a definitive budget.
A couple of suggestions based on my experience with the CFA grant. Is there a place where you can see the previously awarded grants?
I'll look for it.
Because I found that to be very useful in determining what our odds were, how much money they were giving to our kinds of things and all of that. So also, if there's any indication of some of their criteria, which sometimes you can get out of who they gave it to, and sometimes it's kind of hidden in some of the wording and language of the application. So in the CFA grants, you know, it was kind of clear what their target was. So there's just a couple of suggestions to get a sense of how to put in a better application based on what they're looking for.
That's good guidance, John. And they're very specific. They attach templates for the spreadsheets to be used to back up, and you know how they want us to organize the budget and so forth. So it's very specific. So whoever thought of this, I think it was Katie, it is really dead on, because you have to select and define one of 5 areas, and comprehensive master planning funds is the 5th area. So that's what we would be targeting. So
I can't take credit for it. It was Bill from the county's office that forwarded it along to us. So it was directed to us from a professional. But that's awesome. And thank you in advance for your work on it, Mark. And as always, if you have questions or want help pulling stuff together, the committee is here to support you.
okay.
Yeah, and, feel free to reach out to me from my experience with CFA, because I have a feeling there's some parallels between the two and how you put this thing together.
Right. Good guidance. Thank you, John.
It's what you need for these is a creative writing course.
Thank you again, John, for getting the CFA grant submitted. That just needs bells chiming and, you know, streamers streaming, and that was a doozy, and we made it happen. And in that case, I guess we ended up deciding it was kind of important to get it submitted in the end, because you have to submit it potentially once and be rejected to get it the second time. I don't know if this grant program is similar, but maybe because it's smaller and more specific, maybe not so much. But
I would say too is the other thing is you get feedback. So if you put it in and you don't get one, you'll get some feedback, and which will allow you to put a better submission in the following year. In fact, they actually have a formal process in the CFA one called cloning, where you take your old submission and update it so you don't have to start from scratch.
yeah, I mean, maybe that is kind of a similar mindset, because we will, even if we got it in May, fast forward to May 2023, we'll still be potentially at this. So it would, especially because it's reimbursement looking backwards. So, you know, I think whenever we do get it in, we could always do it again if we don't succeed. So laying the foundation and try number 1 is important. But November or May, I think that would be the same mindset.
So my goal would be, so even if we do make the application, because we want to, we can go, they give us sample resolutions, for example, and letters of support. So I could go ahead and, you know, request you draft these letters of support to be countersigned, and, you know, submit the resolution to Jane to get on, you know, so that we at least have those preconditions established.
Awesome. Yeah, that's fantastic. Great. Any other questions or comments on that topic? Okay. Next topic is update on public education sessions. So I'm just going to share a different document. I have good news here. I reached out to the New York Planning Federation. They have really good webinars. One of them, the everything you ever wanted to know about preparing a comprehensive plan. I know a lot of us listened to when we were first starting the process back in March. They got back to me and said that that we would be, as the town is a member of the Federation, we are able to use these webinars inside this Zoom meeting. You know, as long as we're not sharing the link to the webinars with the public, we can host a Zoom meeting and play the webinar, and we can even pause it and comment or not. And we can do that free of charge. So I'm really excited about that. These two that they have, the one that we've watched about preparing a comprehensive plan, and then there's another one that's Introduction to Planning, Zoning, and Land Use. They've got presentations, there's audio, it's really cool. So I was trying to think about a good way to organize these and spread the word about them happening. And my first thought is just to keep it simple. We could treat it like it's a guest speaker and do it for the first hour of a planned meeting. Like, for example, September 28th. We could just have that be the first hour of the meeting, and we could publicize ahead of time. Join us for this meeting. We will be listening and learning from this presentation. What does everybody think about that?
Sounds good.
Yeah,
Would we still be allowed to live stream to YouTube?
Yeah, I was wondering about that. Definitely live stream to YouTube. Absolutely, they said that was fine. But in terms of having the recording available after the fact, I'm not so sure. So I'd have to check with them about that.
so maybe you don't record that part of the meeting.
Yeah. But definitely live streaming. They said, you know, as many people as you know, if you invite hundreds of people and they all attend, that's great. They're all learning, as long as they can't then send the link to somebody else to watch for free.
Well, then if it's a recording, yeah, they can then.
So we would, I think we can figure it out. We just have to, maybe it has to be just Zoom and not YouTube. But we can logistically figure out.
You have to make sure the link doesn't show up in any of the documents.
Yeah, absolutely. I can definitely figure that out with Kirsten. But okay, so I didn't hear any objections. We'll make it September 28th. And then we'll see how that goes. And then we can, I kind of would like to do the planning, zoning, and land use one first, because selfishly, I've never seen it all the way through. And I think it's nice that it's super broad. And then maybe after that, we could do the comprehensive plan one.
Sounds good.
Okay, any questions or comments or concerns? Okay, hearing none. I will work on publicizing that as well. Nothing crazy. We'll just go through the, you know, the town newsletters, the town website, and I can work on that directly. Okay, so next item on our agenda, and no pressure, Jane, because I know you've already chimed in elsewhere. But we have time on the agenda that's open for you for anything you wanted to share or follow up on.
Well, hi, everybody. Really, I think that the biggest feedback from the board, or the most important feedback, was that you're doing a really great job. And thank you. So that was the message that was primarily given to me. And then I just compiled that feedback for you from the RFP. And I guess, I mean, I am a little curious about like some of the different feedback that you got, or like what it may have changed within the RFP specifically. And I was also pretty curious about follow up on like the hamlets and what you all, if you all discussed like what you thought of that feedback. And I thought we might be discussing it tonight. So I am curious about that. Otherwise, I mean, we're very pleased and thank you so much. I don't really have anything to report to you unless you were looking for something specific.
No, thank you. We got the specific stuff out of the way early. I will just, we can definitely chat about the hamlets real quick, but I will just say, and let me share it actually. I put together a Word document that I sent to you, Jane, and to Dan. And I also sent it to the chairs of the planning, or not to the chairs, but to sort of the general emails for planning, zoning, and ACARC. Let me just pull it up really quick. But I would love for you to forward this on to the rest of the town board. That way everybody can see. It is a document that shows the feedback that you provided. And thank you, by the way, for putting this in Word document form. It really beautifully captured everything you guys talked about in the work session and was super helpful. So for each, each point you guys made, I added the bullet points that showed where Charlene and I addressed and made sure that everything got integrated throughout the document.
Very cool.
And then
I'm sorry, Katie, after you finish.
For the general, we didn't get very many comments at all from
thanks for calling the award-winning Lime Restaurant.
But we did put in here what we did to address the feedback that we received from those groups as well.
Great.
Go ahead, Charlene.
The hamlet issue is quite interesting because we included a whole bunch of areas that are not quite hamlets. Hamlets, there is a term, it's a term of art, and the term of art means that it is commercial center. So when you have Wacabuck, Wacabuck is not a commercial center. So, we sort of played with the language so that it is what it's perceived to be, but it may not be.
Right.
So, I mean, it's sort of fudging it a bit, but people think they live in a hamlet and they really don't live in a hamlet.
Right.
The language we went with was self-identified.
Exactly. I mean, it was torturous, but that's what
I know. It's really difficult. I think it's worthy of the amount of discussion it gets. I have to be honest. I mean, it's very interesting. I think one of the things early on in the process was, how do you identify with the neighborhood you live in? I think that's really interesting. And I think that people identify very strongly with their hamlets. And so
you came up with self-identified, because the reality is that you're not.
Right.
But it's very inconsistent, because if you look at when they publish the vaccination rates in town or the COVID rates, they never include Lewisboro, Hamlet, or Vista. They throw those into South Salem. So it's
right, because they're not really hamlets. But I think that's something that the consultant can deal with.
Yeah. Oh, Vista's a hamlet.
Well, Vista is, yes, that's true. I'm sorry.
I think what the important thing for the consultants, and I think the RFP does this well, is to let the consultants know inside our town, this is how the town identifies. We have these self-identified hamlets. And in terms of public engagement and how that will play out, we make it clear that the first meeting, public engagement meetings on the list would be to craft a town-wide vision statement. And that cuts across hamlets, that applies to the full town of Lewisboro. And we also make it clear that that might not be just one meeting, that vision statement, that it has to be at least one meeting, but it might take multiple. And then after that town-wide vision is established, then we can move into having interactive meetings, at least one in each hamlet. So, it might be multiple for each hamlet, but I think, the consultants in how they respond to that and what they suggest, it'll be really interesting to see. We're open, as we've said multiple times in the RFP. Now we've really highlighted that based on everybody's feedback, which I think was really good, that we are open to innovation. We're open to feedback. If we didn't write it in the RFP, but you think it's a good idea, we'd love to hear about it. So it'll be interesting to see what folks come back with. And yeah, I mean, we'll have to divide up, the sessions somehow, because it doesn't make sense to have one meeting that encompasses 12,000 people. We want to break things out in a manner.
Yeah, I'm sure they'll come up with it.
Yeah.
I maybe somebody can answer it. I don't know where the hamlet of Lewisboro is. Like, I don't have a clue.
It's between Vista and South Salem, and it was only recently discovered.
Oh, okay.
About, I would say, maybe 10 or 15 years ago, I think somebody said, oh yeah, there's a Lewisboro hamlet.
Okay.
And you would probably have to talk to Maureen, our town historian, about all of that. But it's north of Vista and south of Lewisboro, or south of South Salem.
Okay.
It's where I live in the Lewisboro hamlet.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Thank you, John.
And there's no town center here.
Jane, did you have follow-up thoughts, or does anybody else have thoughts about public engagement, starting with the town-wide session and then moving to hamlets? And
Yeah, I think that's the way that's exactly the way I was thinking about it too. When the conversation came up in the town board, was that I had no conflict with, I think that hamlet public sessions are actually a crucial part of this process. But when we think about how to vision it out, I was thinking, yeah, you start in the macro, kind of, that's what the visioning is for. So you do kind of that macro level visioning, and then you get all that kind of more specific feedback. And from the beginning of this process, I remember talking about, eventually we're going to be spinning out into subcommittees and getting people involved who are going to be leading arms of this project that we haven't even engaged yet. And so part of what's going to take that on and drive that is people's interests. And I would be floored if that wasn't in some way driven by local hamlet groups who are already kind of chomping at the bit to communicate, which is amazing. So I think that macro level visioning and then being informed, you could even intersperse the hamlet sessions in between the vision sessions. So it's like one big town visioning session and a couple hamlet sessions, then another, come back to the visioning session, go back to some hamlets, and kind of, there's lots of ways to do it. But I like hearing that we're all on the same page from all the conversations I've had with the town board, and now here of going from that more macro level and then, working out those details. And so that's it. So I think we're on the same page.
Great. Yeah, and ultimately, I think we're all very open to deferring to consultants who have done this with other towns successfully and have, that working knowledge that if they say, well, this is how we did it over here and it worked really well, but we could tweak it, whatever they say and how we interpret that for Lewisboro, I think will make a lot of sense. Cool. Anything else, Jane?
I have nothing else.
Okay.
Does anybody have anything else for me? Okay.
Okay.
Thank
Awesome.
you.
Let me go back to the agenda. Thanks again, Jane, and extend our thanks to the rest of the board. Will you do me a favor and just make sure to forward that email that has the final RFP and the Word document I just showed? Will you forward that on to everybody?
Yes.
Cool.
I'm going to do that right now as well. I will do that right now.
Thank you so much. Okay, so committee members, closing thoughts, comments. I'll bring up the action item list. If anybody has any questions or thoughts on open action items that we haven't covered already. Okay, awesome.
I have a little bit of feedback on the project for public spaces.
Oh, sure, go for it.
charrette concept,
Mhm.
when you think is appropriate to discuss that.
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. So I find this organization based in nonprofit based in New York City to be very intriguing, and they've championed the concept of placemaking and sort of define that term. And so I reached out to them, and they're pretty buttoned down like all these other very established nonprofits, you know, that get funding from Rockefeller Brothers Fund and Ford Foundation. So I said, oh, do you guys want to come and do a dog and pony show in Lewisboro and tell us what you're about? And they've been through this before. Obviously, they want to know what our budget was and so forth. But I had a conversation with their staff, and they actually do have, they provided a menu that I'm going to forward to you of options. So they obviously do full-on consulting to develop master plans, but they have training classes, and they actually do have a 1-hour crash course that they would do as a webinar. Now they like to get paid, and they sort of have a $200 to $300 an hour, as much as you can afford, sort of contribution ask, sort of donation. But they gave us an offering which would be so I would send you a list of topics, and they could craft a 1-hour webinar for us, which is designed for teams like ours, and it would focus on placemaking skills and criteria and the basics, or they could focus on inclusive engagement or governance and operations or how to develop case studies. But I thought the placemaking 101 crash course might be interesting for us to consider. Again, I'll forward it to you. That would be a webinar. Alternatively, they offer online training for small groups that are involved in the planning process. And those are 4 modules of 90-minute sessions. Or you can graduate to a half-day training session in their office in New York, or a full-day training session. But so they do offer something, and their focus would be public spaces, strengthening communities while building public spaces to, yeah, that's basically it. So I could send this to you, but it would be something to consider.
Thank you for gathering that. That sounds awesome. Yeah, send it along to the committee, and we can take a look at it, and then we can put it on an agenda to talk about at a future meeting.
Okay.
Charlene, you have a question?
Mark, do you want to include them in the RFP process?
Oh, yeah.
Sure, that's a good idea.
You know, rather than, because I think that we really just sort of need to go with someone, and they have a particular viewpoint on life, which is great, but we don't know whether we're going to really take that particular viewpoint. But if they're in the RFP, then, and they do want to be paid, which obviously we are going to. So if you can send me so I can add to the list their name, the contact, and their number and the email. I'll include them in the RFP list.
Okay.
If in fact the committee says okay.
Yeah, I don't know that they do master plans and the
I'm
nuts
sorry,
and
Ms. Heard
bolts.
then.
Do you know if they do?
No, I thought I heard you say that they do.
I think I said that. I did say that, but let me fact check that. And so if they do that, sure. If not, I mean, I was just thinking of them as an opportunity to get a charrette and something, get us jazzed up about some creative thinking, but really no more than that. I just thought they were sort of an interesting resource for a crash course, thinking out of the box. But I wasn't really envisioning them as conducting and documenting a master plan with all the necessary criteria and exhibits. But I could be wrong, so I'll look into that.
Thank you.
If it's something they do, I
Yeah.
don't see why we shouldn't include them. It's certainly a sort of the more the merrier attitude when it comes to sending out the RFP. Okay, yeah, so fact check that and then send everybody the menu that you were talking about.
Yep.
If we do end up adding them to the RFP list, then we won't be able to do anything with them until, right? Do I have that? Yeah, because
Yeah, I think it's one or the other.
yeah.
Mhm.
So if you fact check that and then send us an email with everything, then we can kind of decide offline if we want to include them in the RFP or if it would be more important to do a training or something. Cool. Thank you for looking into that.
Sure.
I just, by the way, put a placeholder in the planning firm's document, which is in the drive under RFP, so everybody has access to it. Okay, let me bring up the action item list. Was there anything else anybody wanted? Any final thoughts or questions about any action item list?
I just had one more planning firm that I don't think was on Charlene's list. Sorry, I was just looking to try to find the name of it. Charlene, I think I may have emailed this to you, but if I didn't, they're located in Somers, and the firm name is Barton and Luidici, I think is the name.
Send it on with the information and I'll just add it. The more the merrier, as Katie said.
All right, I'll send that over.
Yeah, it's not on there right now, so.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
I'm sorry. I don't remember if you sent it or not.
Okay. Anything else? Okay, and we're under time. Hooray. Thanks again, everybody. Committee members. I know we've got a long road ahead of us, but I'm so proud of everything we've done so far. And thank you again for everything, all the work that's going in. I really appreciate it. And I know our community does as well. Thank you, Jane, and extend our thanks to the town board. Kirsten, thank you so much again for your amazing work. We could not do this without you. And with that, I will motion to adjourn the meeting. Can I get
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, thanks so much, everybody. Oh, I didn't say our next meeting dates. Oops. Okay, hold on. Let me look at that. I was so excited we were under time, and we still are. September 14th and September 28th. We're just gonna skip over the Labor Day season. And so September 14th, we will be back here for our next meeting. Okay, so now you can all go. Thank you.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everybody.